Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Break the Cycle with DSD. I have a guest I just recently found. I was perusing Facebook the other day, and this recommended live stream came up, and I was introduced to the Dad Talk Today podcast with Eric Carroll. So I reached out to him and asked him if he would come on our show and talk a little bit about what he's doing. What he's done a lot in the last. I think he'll get more into it in a moment, but in the last, I think, 30 days or, maybe 6 weeks, he has started this podcast and has been crushing it with some really impressive interviews. So I'm definitely going to encourage you guys to check him out. But Eric, thank you very much for coming on the show with us today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So could you just talk a little bit about what Dad Talk Today is and what you guys are, what you're working on? And I think you have a co-host with it, but just kind of give a brief introduction of what you're doing and what your goal is.
Absolutely. So Dad Talk Today, about 3 months ago, we started off as a blog. I was just going to make a website. I'm a targeted parent, so I know what a lot of people that are going through alienation and, been through the narcissistic battle, what they're going through. So we started off as a blog, and I interviewed a couple of fathers, and people started telling me, hey, you need to start making a podcast because our blogs were doing really, really good. So we started a podcast, and I was going to talk about many different things. One of our first interviews was with Dr. Mark Roseman of the Toby Center, and we covered parental alienation right off. Well, after that, I had on a lawyer, and then after that, I actually had on one of Joe Rogan's guests. I had on Dr. Sean Baker. He was one of the most controversial episodes on Rogan, and we talked about the carnivore diet, which was a really popular podcast on Rogan, but the whole parental alienation community and family law was like, hey, you're not talking about parental alienation. What's going on? And so, well, guys, I was going to talk about many different things. It was like, no, we want you here. So we kind of fell inside of this niche in the community because it's so needed. I honestly thought I was a rare breed, but there are so many of us out there that are fighting parental alienation and this battle inside the courtroom that we recognize the need for what we're doing and having these conversations with the professionals. That way we can get the conversations in the general population and get some awareness going with this thing, man. It's a sick battle we're up against.
Oh, you are absolutely right on that. And I think we were talking the other day just about how a lot of people don't, unless you're in the middle of it or somebody who's going through it, you really don't understand the reality of it until you're sitting there in the middle of it. And I agree with you that more awareness and making the material more available to average people. That's what I think is ingenious about your Dad Talk Today type and covering multiple things. Is it to me seems like a really good way to bring multiple topics in. I know you're kind of pivoting to focus a lot on the parental alienation and that aspect of it, but every little bit helps. But one of the other things I wanted to ask you is, how in the world have you been able to get all these guests? I was looking at it. The one I saw you on was the one you did with Dr. Childress. And that was a fascinating discussion. I was like, it popped up on my feed. I normally don't watch live streams on Facebook. I just, I'm just pretty darn busy. And that was a fascinating conversation. And I know he doesn't do a lot of podcast type interviews. So, you've had a lot of people who really are embracing what you're doing and are taking the opportunity to come on your show. How is that all played out?
I'll be honest with you, man, it's just by luck. One ridiculous rate. I think just in 3.5 months on Facebook, we're at 34,000 followers.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so we just started getting guest after guest. I started kind of really dialing in with the who's who with the professionals behind parental alienation. We've had on some amazing guests. One of the ones that he's maybe not as well known, but Dr. William Bernet, he's a professor of psychology at Vanderbilt University. He's one of the ones that's actually trying to get parental alienation into the DSM-5. And he came on.
That absolutely needs to be there to get recognized. I know parental alienation is kind of a tough one because it's in that gray area. You can, I mean, the term makes sense, right? I mean, you can find information on it and you have those aha moments that just make sense. You're like, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm dealing with. But I also know that in the family court systems and such, it's not necessarily a recognized term. So a lot of times if you go in and you say those things, it doesn't really help you. So that's one thing I noticed on that. And I'm sure you've had other discussions on that. What's your take on that part of it?
Oh, well, man, it is exactly like you said. None of us, for the most part, knew what parental alienation was until we was going through it. I myself, I was banging my head up against the wall, going crazy. I had to go see a therapist. My mind was so messed up going through
Yeah.
this battle. Nothing made sense. And then I just started Googling one day. It's like, I got to find out what's going on. And it's exactly like you said. Once you see it and you start
Yeah.
reading the symptoms and the narcissistic traits, you're like,
Yeah.
this is what's going on.
Bingo.
So you start searching in the Facebook groups. One of the very first Facebook groups I found was the Alliance to Solve Parental Alienation, which is ran by Dr. Childress and Dorsey.
Oh,
And
nice. Okay.
yeah, so I got in there and I got really involved with that. And in between that, that was where the idea for Dad Talk came up. We, like I said, it first started as a blog, but I started realizing this community needs somebody bringing out these issues because media is not covering it. And this is definitely a battle that we are fighting, not only in this nation, guys. I'm talking to people from Canada, Australia, England, South
Yeah.
America. I mean, it's everywhere. Africa. It's going on, and it's a worldwide epidemic. And why we are not covering it in the mainstream media is just boggling my mind. So I think what's that?
No, I was gonna say, I think it's just that people they don't take it as a real issue. The people that are complaining about it or saying they're victims of it. And I want to get in a minute, I want to get into your story. You kind of briefly hit it, but just in a little bit more detail. But I think it's one of those things where people just figure, okay, well, if someone's alienated, they did something, this just doesn't happen. One parent isn't going to force a child to hate or to reject another parent. There has to be a reason. And I don't think most people realize that no, the reason is one parent is forcing the issue, the child's stuck in the middle, and they're basically just letting go of the one that's the easiest parent to let go and staying typically with the high conflict one because they normally have possession and they're in that environment. Basically, the children are in a daily battle to just survive.
Yeah.
And I think people just don't understand that. And media it's starting to turn around. I mean, there've been some CNN reports where they've interviewed some fathers and mothers who've been in this type of situation. Some documentaries are starting to come out, but it's just starting to change, right? I mean, I think now there's more, there's more people out there who it's either happened to them, maybe it's happened to one of their siblings, or maybe it's a parent and it's happening to their adult child. So there's more people who are being affected by this, and it's people are not necessarily looking at it and saying, oh, well, that's normal. What I often say, and I'd like to hear what you think about this. I often say that it needs to get to the point where someone says, wait a minute, why would a child hate another parent? A child that's abused by another parent, really really abused, maybe that parent is in jail or whatever, they still want to have a relationship with that parent. They still want to have a connection. So why would a situation that was effectively normal before the divorce, before the separation, all of a sudden turn toxic? And now this kid from, 7 years old to maybe 18 years old now hates mom or now hates dad. I mean, people should say, wait a minute, what's going on there, right?
Most of the time it's just because the healthy party said, I'm not going to take this anymore. And it's crazy when you find yourself with that narcissist. There's these little battles that you're going on that's going on inside of your relationship that you're just completely oblivious to. And once you finally get on the other side of that, you can look back at it and say, I cannot believe I let this go on that long. You realize the little games that they was playing inside of your head.
Well, and the funny thing you say when you mention that is when you're starting to realize it, you still don't necessarily realize what you're dealing with. So you still think you're dealing with you think you're dealing with somebody that's effectively normal and that you're going to be able to communicate with and co-parent with. And then the mask drops and the claws come out and you're in basically the fight for your life that you didn't even know. You don't even know you were in a fight, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I got guys that come to me all the time. Women too. They'll be like, I talked to them. I said this, this, and this, and they just don't get it. They don't get it. And I was like, that's because they're not going to get it, guys. No matter how much you facilitate in a conversation and how much you try to become humble, you're not going to get that on the other side. And it's definitely a mental health disorder, I do believe. And one of the things that's helped me become a little bit better is realizing that person that's doing to you a lot of the time, it's not that it's a personal attack. They can't help it. You know,
Yeah.
there's really something going on up there. And that's another reason we need that awareness, and that it needs to be brought forth, because these symptoms and the things that they do are textbook, and it's going on.
Oh
And
yeah.
it could probably be treated, but until these domestic violence groups and these other people that come against us actually team up, that's one thing I don't get, Duane, is all right, so we got these domestic violence groups that want parental alienation just completely thrown away. It doesn't exist. It's just one of those things, you know, it's taboo. We don't want equal shared parenting passed, and they don't realize we're on the same team here, guys. We don't.
Yeah. The problem is, and what I noticed in my, on my channel early on, because some of those type of discussions came up. And I mean, what would happen is someone, because I'm a proponent of equal shared parenting, right? I mean, it's like,
Absolutely.
I think that if I, maybe you agree that if I would have walked into family court and they would have said, okay, there's no pre issues, haven't been arrested, there's no domestic violence. This is 50-50, bam, the gavel hit. My situation would have been a lot cheaper and would have been a lot calmer. But I, like most people, ended up having to fight tooth and nail for every moment I could get with my kids. And it just creates this nightmare. And I get the other side of it, right? A
Right.
person who has a toxic spouse or toxic ex, and you're thinking, oh my God, my kids need to have the minimal amount of time with that other person. Shared parenting or 50-50 scares the crap out of them, right? I mean, and I know, and we need to, let me finish this comment and then
No,
because
you're
I
good.
think people need to understand where you're at. Because in my situation, I had like a 9-month court thing. I basically was able to get 50-50 pretty quickly. It still was expensive, but and even during that, I was still seeing my kids every other weekend. I was taking them to school in the morning, that type of thing. So I still had a reoccurring connection with my kids. So that, obviously that was helpful, but I was like, the best I thought I could get was 50-50. So the
Right.
idea of thinking that I could get full, primary custody, 80-20 with me and only weekends with their mom was unrealistic. And I can see the flip side where if somebody has, if it's the mom, and it's not always the mom, but let's just say stereotypically the mom, has physical possession of the kids, then it's, getting 50-50 is like a loss. And I, when I would talk to people, I would say, I hear what you're saying, right? I mean, I agree with you that the kids should be with the more stable parent, but with what what I'm saying, with what you're saying, had that happened in my situation, I wouldn't even be a father right now. And I think that was an eye-opening discussion with people, because they're like, oh, because you look at it from your position and they weren't looking at that. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, man. So we've had a few mothers on the show because we discussed the gender war. This has definitely happened on both sides. So it's
Yeah.
not a men's issue. It's not a women's issue. The only thing I got against that, though, is a few of the mothers that I've talked to, they came to the show and was like, we know what it's just like to be just like you. And I'm like, okay. And then I asked them their situation, like, I got 50-50. I didn't get full custody. This is wrong. And I'm like, hey, that's what we're
Yeah, I hear you.
fighting for over here. Okay. That's you're not on the same level as us, because we believe each parent is equal. So there was a little bit of a disconnection there, and that should just be the norm. There's a few things we talk about a lot. One of them is, I believe that when a child is born, right away there should be a paternity test. If we made that the norm, it wouldn't be such a big thing. But think of how many fathers and mothers that would protect. But
Yeah.
if you did that, think of how many. So we got Carnell Smith coming on our show this Saturday. Carnell was on Dr. Phil. He paid a mother child support for 11 years for a child that was not his. And then when he found out, this is in the state of Georgia, when he found out, he went to get his child support canceled, and the judge said, nope, you should have found out sooner. You're still on the hook for it. So he went and got a bill passed here in Georgia to protect against paternity fraud. But see, if that one little step would be implemented, think of how many fathers that would protect. And you know what? If you can prove that that's your child from then on, there should be 50-50. It should be the norm. There shouldn't be no court. We could save that for the real cases, because there's always going to be cases where you probably need it in court.
Yeah. And I think the getting back, well, first, let me ask you this, because we haven't hit it yet. I know we talked about it offline. So in your situation, I mean, you're still in the midst of it, right? Yep. I mean, if I remember correctly, you have a couple of kids, but the one kid that's being alienated from you haven't seen for quite a while, if I remember correctly.
Year and a half.
See, and I wanted to hit that, because a lot of people, I mean, one, you're doing a tremendous thing, right? I mean, from what from the shows I've seen and what you put online, you're not an angry, well, you may be angry, but what I'm saying, but let me clarify this.
I'm past that stage, but that's normal.
Yeah, but you're positive. Yep. You're trying to do something. I mean, you're not running a hit piece radio show or a podcast. You're trying to get good information out there. You're trying to find ways to help people, which is absolutely what we need, because more people, just putting out the hate and vitriol just doesn't help. So how are things going in your case, though? I mean, that's a long time to not, so you have not seen your kid in that period of time.
It's been a year and a half. I'll be honest with you. I can't talk on it much. It started, okay. But it is very much one of those, I wanted to settle it outside of court. I'd asked to see my child, be told no. And then the next day I'm seeing on social media how I haven't asked about my kid in 2 months type deal. And it's the typical case, guys. You know what? A lot of our stories, while there's bits and pieces of it that are different, they're very much the same. And
I hear you on that one.
Yeah. So, but it's one of those things that we're fighting. I definitely know how each and every single one of us that are in here feels. And, it's about all of our stories coming together and uniting to get something done about this mess.
So let me ask you this, Eric, and I'm sure, like you said, we both have audience members who are going through the same thing, and your situation is different than mine. And I know you can't, I'm not going to ask specifics about the case. I'm just going to say, what did you do to survive this, where you didn't go crazy over that year and a half? Because I think a lot of times, personally, I think it's a trap to try to get you to respond in a way that your ex can use against you. Okay. So that you can say, oh, see, Eric is a mess, and he did this and he did that, and this is why this should be. But what were you able to do to I guess dig deep to be able to just keep plugging along and not lose yourself in this?
So mine was an extreme case, guys. And when I say textbook, I mean, Jesus, I didn't just get a text message at a time. I got like 30 or 40 of them this long. All right. I've had handwritten notes in the mail. All right. 25 pages, front and back. I would get handed that every time I would go see my daughter, that kind of stuff. So I took all of my communication, because it could be coming at any time in the morning. I said, you know what? If I'm going to communicate with you, it's going to be through email.
Oh,
so we started doing
an idea.
Email. Okay. I wanted to have track of every bit of my communication. Well, then I started noticing inside of those emails, it was gaslighting. It was never anything about when I can see my child. That's all I need to talk to you about, really the welfare of my child. So what I do is, if I started reading and I got to sentence 1 or sentence 2 and found out there was anything in there outside of, when I can see my child, I'd say, hey, look, I didn't even read it. Tell me when I can see my child, and I'll leave it there. That was it. That's the only thing I responded with. Up until that point, that gaslighting used to get into me, man. I fed into it. And I realized
it's a trap.
It is. It is a trap. So I found myself going crazy. I went to a therapist, and it took me a good 3 visits before that actually started helping me, because I went in there feeling so guilty. My mind, I felt like it was about to explode. I was literally going nuts. I thought I was having a mental breakdown. And he said, well, what's your biggest problem? I was like, I feel so guilty for not seeing my child. He's like, well, why? This has nothing to do with you. You're trying. You're not being allowed. Right, he's like, you got to give yourself some breathing room, clear your head and get out there and go fight. And until there's something that you can do, allow yourself a little bit of freedom. I left that office and I became a different man, dude.
That is phenomenal. You know, it's so hard to find a good therapist that can connect the dots like that. That's great.
Yeah,
So, and
yeah.
was that recommended to you, or did you just basically find the first one you could, or how did you how did you pick that guy?
I seeked it out. I read up the reviews. I found out who was good. The dangerous part about that is it took me like a month to get into my first visit. So I had a
Yeah.
month with those thoughts in my head that I thought were literally about to drive me insane. But I was definitely a better person leaving that. And then a couple months down the line, I started this. This has been the most therapeutic thing I've ever done, man. A blog, guys. Write down your feelings. Don't let that stuff stay trapped up inside your head.
Eric, that's excellent advice. That is key. And what you were talking about before, I have a technique that I push, and I know there's other names for it, but I call it hybrid no contact. So whenever they're trying to gaslight you with those emails, with all the information, and just pick out whatever if they're asking a question, find out what that one question is, and that 10 pages of them saying you're a horrible human, answer that. And I love your little thing saying, hey, this doesn't have it, just what's the answer? I love that.
That's
That's a
it.
good, that's
And
a
you
good
know what?
twist
It
on it.
pisses them off more than anything, man.
Well, they want to fight. They want you to reaction.
That's
They
it.
want you to engage.
They love the argument.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's a victory for them. Even if they lose the argument, it's still a victory because that's what they're going for. They're going for conflict. And
And
yeah, go ahead.
And when you won't play a narcissist game, they check out.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what? That's a good point. Cause I've seen that too, where as soon as you kind of get into that with them, they'll just stop responding. They'll just like, I'm out, peace out. And then they just disappear. And then God forbid, whenever you stop talking to them, whatever time frame it is for them, they'll start coming back around, start trying to hoover around.
Yeah, man, there's only so much you can try until there's something you guys can do. You got to get that guilt and just take it off your shoulders because you're not here by your choice if you're going through parental alienation. I do think there is a level of self-ownership, realize what we could have all done better because there's always going to be somewhere where we came up short. But in this fight, that guilt from not being able to see your child, don't own that. That's not yours to own, just don't.
Yeah. That's still got to be tough though with the anger on it, where you just get so frustrated that someone's pushing this through you. How old's your daughter anyways?
2.5.
So at least the good thing about in your situation is you have time to get this stupid part resolved. And then, it should be resolved enough to where the real parental alienation can't really take hold, hopefully.
Right, right. But see, then again, if something doesn't happen for somebody that might not have the money or they can't get nothing done about their case, you know what? The alienation starts that young because look, if he was never here when you was growing up and you've got no memories of him, whatever little bullcrap I want to put in your head to make you believe that you had this deadbeat for a dad, it makes it that much more believable.
Yeah, no, I hear you. But I think a lot of times though, I think it's worse whenever they have more time to mold the little human. And a lot of times it happens while you're still married or while you're still together. They'll start putting you down and start running you down or creating this narrative to where whenever the separation and divorce starts happening, you've already been torpedoed. You've already fallen into their trap. And now you're trying to, and that's kind of what my situation was. Then you're trying to dig out of years of stuff that you didn't even realize was going on. It's like, oh dear God, I was being played for, almost a decade and didn't even realize it. And like you said, though, in that situation, it's, we all play a role in that and helped ourselves to get to this stage in a certain way. I know that's hard to say sometimes, and I normally don't chat about it too much because, it's real easy, like you were talking about with the shame and the guilt, for people to just dive into that and then just kind of have it drive their emotions down.
Absolutely, man. So, I mean, there's little things that you can notice early on before you have a kid with somebody. If there's some of those tendencies there, one of the things that I look back on now that I was oblivious to when I was in the relationship, the wedge she was driving between me and my family. I had
great example.
such a close family. But she had me and my mom to where we didn't talk for almost 6 months. As close as I am to my mom, I live on the same property as my mom. I love my mom to
Wow.
death. But she had me thinking that my mom was the enemy, then my brother, then my sister, then my oldest daughter from my previous marriage. It was starting to become, look, guys, anybody that has influence over you that can make you say, wake up,
Yep.
they want them out of your life, okay?
Hmm.
Because then they can come in there and get that ultimate control of you, and that's what a narcissist wants. They crave that control. They want you to bow down to them and obey their every word. That's why alienation kind of creeps in sometimes. You know what? I want you to have to ask me when you can see your child, and I'll let you
Yeah.
know when you can see your child. Corrie Ray, a good friend of mine from Illinois, Fathers for Equality, he brung up with something and I loved it. He said he cannot stand to hear somebody say, I let them see their child. You don't
Ugh.
let somebody see their child. That's their child. That's their right. That's just another word that's used for control anytime somebody uses that, but it's used so much.
I think visitation is too. What's your
Yeah.
visitation? I mean, you're not there. You're not parenting your kids. You're visiting your kids. I mean, I think like what you're just talking about, it's a subtle use of language to set that frame, to set that baseline or that groundwork that, you're not really involved. You're a visitor in your kid's life. You're not really the main person. You're just, you're just a, what actually reminds me of a story when I was going through my custody evaluation. We were getting into the conversation about my ex wanted to move states, and the evaluator said, well, one of you is going to if this happens, one of you is going to be a parent and the other person is going to be like a friend, or an uncle. Because you're not going to get to be a parent. You're going
Right.
to, you'll have limited interaction with your kids. You'll basically get to visit them for a few weeks, maybe, month during the summer or whatever, and you're not going to have the relationship. And I mean, and the narcissist, that's what they want. I mean, that's what they're striving for, is to effectively erase you out of the picture, use the system to abuse you for financial gain and just for pain. I think even, a lot of people say that if custody wasn't, or money wasn't an issue, it would change it, which is, I agree with that. But I think a lot of these people, it's just control. If they can turn around and just take the screws and, twist the knob, so to speak, just to break your heart, and it hurts, they don't care who it hurts.
Right.
It's really vicious.
It is. It's very vicious. And, it's crazy, man, is once we leave their life and so they don't have us to control anymore, who does it go to? It goes to the child. And, they're
Oh
the ones
man.
that's suffering. This is one of
Yeah.
the most severe forms of child abuse out there. And for the fact that people would try to say that it doesn't exist and to try to protect that, it just sickens me, because that child is the one that's going through this manipulation and that psychological abuse now, being told that their parent that helped bring them in this world doesn't love them and how big of a
Yeah.
piece of crap they are. And that just tears the child's heart out, makes them feel like a piece of their identity is just lost.
Yeah. Man, you're spot on. And I think until that gets recognized, it's going to really be tough, you know. And that also boils into the stereotypes of like the deadbeat dad, right? I mean, everyone hears
Mm,
that term, or the Disneyland dad.
I
So
don't like it.
it's, oh, I hate it. I hate it. It used to, my ex used to, I would hear through the grapevine that I was being called the Disneyland dad, and I'm thinking, I have no money. I can't, I can barely buy food. I can barely pay the electric bill. The most we can do when the kids come over is play hide and seek in an empty house, because I have no ability to do anything. And I'm the Disneyland dad. Like, are you
Right.
effing kidding me? I mean, it's like, I mean, there's no, there's no Disneyland or buying a motorcycles or new computers or whatever. I mean, it's been a nightmare.
You're not kidding, man. I don't know. I definitely haven't been making no trips to Disneyland, that's for sure. But the thing that really gets me is the deadbeat. I hate that term.
Oh,
I hate that term so much, because you know what? There's always two sides to every story. Yeah, and again, it's not a gender thing, but
Nope.
let's go back to the stereotypes against fathers. For so long, fathers have been the guy that just cheats around, just wants sex, that leaves the wife high and
Yeah.
dry and everything. So when these alienators come out here, especially nowadays with social media, oh, he just left me. He doesn't want nothing to do with his child. People so easily believe that.
And I think the issue with that is people generally, well, I'll tell you what, I'll say this and I'll ask you your opinion on it. Cause I know before I went through this experience, when someone would say something to me about their significant other, some horror story, I would immediately believe it. It wouldn't even dawn on me to question it, even to the point whenever you would see on the news some domestic violence type thing, you're thinking, oh my God, how could someone do that? Now, when someone says something to me, I always pause and go, huh, what really is going on? What really happened? Do you find yourself doing the same thing?
Oh, there's always two sides to every story. And I'll tell you what, especially inside of these groups that we're a part of inside of this community, the alienators made their way inside of it, claiming to be the alienated. And I
Yeah.
can
Oh,
tell once,
absolutely.
yeah, once you get a little bit into the conversation and start feeding off of some of the dynamics, you can spot it right away. And it's like, okay, I know who I'm talking to now. And
Yeah.
that's a scary thing, man.
You make a great point, and I think it's something that we need to touch on a little bit more. Is that we have to be cautious of it. I don't want to say paranoid, because that just takes you down a whole
Right.
nother rabbit hole that's not healthy. However, you do need to be cautious of what people are saying. And I mean, you can still be empathetic, right? So if somebody comes up to me and they tell me, or they send me an email of their story, my going in position is always to basically believe it, but I don't put myself in a position to, like I'm not gonna go, grab a sword and go run into battle just off of one discussion, right? I mean, it's going
Right.
to be find out a little bit more, and see really what's going on before you do that. And I would recommend anybody, if you're talking to someone, especially on the community side, be cautious. If somebody's validating your story, that's great, but be wary of just immediately believing every story you hear, and running to that person's defense. I mean, be empathetic, give them a shoulder, but don't be an enabler, right? I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. I've been on the guilty side of that. I've had people that have came to me and told me their story, and I was taking up for them tooth and nail. And I find out a little bit later on, look what
Yeah.
I was protecting. Now they're the ones putting the knife in my back. And
Oh
just
yeah.
because I'm not playing to their narrative, now we're the enemy. It's a sick game, man, and you got to be careful. And one of the things that we did, we started like a support group where people can come in there and just talk. That way, it's not becoming too personal, because
Yeah.
you got to watch out getting too invested into it. Again, there's two sides to every story. And as much as like we're all ramped up and we want to fight up against parental alienation,
Right.
and when you hear these stories, you're ready to react. Man, I'm telling you, it is a very, very good percentage of those people in here that are claiming to be who you are right now. So,
Yeah. I
yeah,
would say a good way to weed that out is, I mean, obviously somebody who's new into it, and if someone's coming in saying, "Oh my God, this is what I'm dealing with right this moment," the people who are seriously going through it, they're looking for answers and they're looking for solutions, and to they want the pain to go away in themselves, and they want answers, right?
right,
And and if people are willing to say, okay, like if they come to you and they go, "Hey, Eric, uh, okay, so you're dealing with this. I mean, what did you do? I mean, like what I asked you earlier, and how did you survive?" And they're looking for constructive, actionable ways to take back some control of their sanity. That's a good indication. But I mean, if the story is always, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, this is happening, and it's like, well, wait a minute, what are you doing to try to fix it? Like even, even what you were just talking about a moment ago, or earlier, and when we started about that communication. I mean, if the person is saying, I'm getting these emails and this is what I wrote, and it's always the same tit for tat, it's like, hey, there's something wrong there. I mean, like you were talking about, there's an easy solution on those things to just don't engage with it. Focus on what the critical issue is, and stop feeding, feeding the other person their narcissistic supply. So
So usually when you find somebody that's really new into this, or they're trying to find some resources, they're in that fight or flight mode, and we
yeah.
all know what that feels like.
Oh yeah.
So the first thing is to make them aware of, hey, yes, you feel like a victim right now, but you got to get rid of that victim mentality, and you've got to clear that head. Now, remember,
Yeah.
nobody goes into war with a clouded head. You can't fight good that way. You've got to heal your
Yeah.
head, get yourself level headed, and then we're gonna find somewhere to go with this thing. And it's about getting them emotionally stable before you start having these
Oh man,
conversations.
that is so key. I'm glad you mentioned that, because you can't survive in this situation if you're not emotionally stable. You
Yep.
can be played, and more than likely you will make mistakes, and those mistakes can be catastrophic.
Absolutely. And it's easy. It's easy if you are a targeted parent and you're going through this to be emotionally unstable. And I see lots of solutions, guys. There's people like, let's all just wake up tomorrow and stop paying child support. Let's all just, they got these different things that come up. And it's like, guys, I know that sounds good and you want answers
Yeah.
overnight, but this is
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
battle that's been going on for 40, 50 years. Okay. If there was an overnight solution by now, we probably would have had it by now. So don't react emotionally. Get yourself prepared for the battle that you're about to go up against. And it's key. It really is.
I think one thing, this is the way I look at it, and I'd love to get your perspective on this too, is I think, like looking at my situation with my own father and how he was just brutalized back in the day, like in the late 70s, if I remember correctly, late 70s, early 80s. And in that time frame, dads didn't get custody unless something I mean, it just wasn't heard of, right? It's like,
Right.
those were the days where, if you were a guy walking into family court, you lost. And if your ex was toxic and narcissistic, and those people have existed since the dawn of time, this isn't
Yep.
something new, you were hosed, right? And I was alienated against my own father. I barely got to see him. He was financially ruined during the divorce, and just constantly brutalized with zero recourse. I mean, with just the judge basically saying, F you, pay up. And he was a cop. I mean, so, his first hearing, he goes into what he thought was going to be just an initial hearing in uniform, like on his, on a break. And, the judge just torpedoed him. It's like, hey, you're going to give her 105% of your take home pay. I don't care. You need to figure out something else to do to make, whatever. I mean, he was just crushed. Whereas now it seems like even 50-50, most people seem like, in your situation, probably when you go through the process, you'll probably get 50-50. I mean, you're going to have to fight for it. But I mean, whereas in the past, if this was 30 years ago, the situation you're dealing with would be the next 18 years. I mean, you would be sitting there waiting, hoping that, when your daughter became an adult, that maybe she would look, search you out, and you'd be able to then have a connection. So, I mean, I think things are changing, but it's like you said, it's absolutely a slow process.
Yeah, man. It's gonna be a while. And I mean, you're definitely right about that. But society's changed altogether.
Oh yeah.
Back, like you said, back in the day, you wouldn't have seen too many kids going around with a single dad. It was the mom that was getting the custody.
Yeah. And
True
now
that.
there's a lot of stories of dads getting full custody.
It's shifting. It's
It
starting
is.
to shift. And that's why, guys, you got to stay focused, and you can't make this a father's issue, because now it's becoming about who's got the better lawyer. And there's many other
Oh yeah.
things that play in there. And it's happening on the other side. Narcissism isn't just a women's thing, dude. I know so many men narcissists out there. It's not even funny.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you on that one. And I think the other benefit for a lot of this information coming out, obviously, it's going to have an effect on the family court system, but just being able to recognize and understand and see or pick out these toxic people in your professional life, in your maybe your extracurricular activities, family and friends, is key. Because I mean, I think once we realize that behavior or certain behaviors is just unacceptable and isn't right, you can start to build boundaries and say, I'm not going to allow that in my life. And I mean, and it's across the board, and I think that's good that this information, I think it's starting to get it out there to help that change overall, and maybe in some ways social media is helping with that because it's really bringing a light to it, but it's also I mean, your show. I mean, you said what, 6 weeks or 3 months ago, you decided to start doing something, and it's morphed into this very popular podcast, and primarily you're on Facebook. And we'll leave the links will be in the show notes or the video description. I mean, it's just exploded. I mean, you're getting numbers like, okay, it's just like on one of your recent shows. What's the viewership you're getting on these things?
So we are facing some hardcore censorship. I'm not going to lie to you, because out of 34,000 followers, our number one show was with Mr. Christopher Carlton. We had 11,000 live viewers on that video. And when it happened, we watched our viewership just spike. And we was like, hey, everybody, we see that you're here. And we started talking to the community while we had them there.
Nice.
Yesterday, I ran an 8-hour marathon, and we barely got 2,000 views out of that.
Dude,
and it's
but
just,
see, the thing that I hear what you're saying,
yeah.
but 2,000 views on a live show is freaking phenomenal. I mean, it's those are incredible. I mean, and you guys, when you look at his YouTube channel, they're starting to just put some stuff on YouTube and starting to leverage off of YouTube. But those numbers are amazing. I mean, really big, like YouTube channels, maybe you'll get 400 or 500 people on a show. I mean, so to get thousands of people who are tuning in effectively is phenomenal. I mean, and that's a great testament to what you're doing and what you're producing and what you're putting out there. And I mean, it's great. I mean, even with you're talking about the censorship. I see what you're saying. You got 38,000 people. There should be 20,000 people on a show. Those numbers are amazing, dude, at least in my opinion.
Well, thank you, man. I mean, but it's like when I was telling you about, we had Dr. Bernet on. There's a professor of psychology. He's one of the most respected doctors behind parental alienation, trying to get it to where it can be diagnosed into the DSM-5. And after we got done with that video, I go and look at it, and I find that it's been reported as sensational content and hate speech. There was nothing about that video that was sensational content or hate speech. We lost our Facebook for a whole week because of that. Now, who do you think that was? I hate to make my conspiracy theories, but there's people out there that do not want equal shared parenting paths, and they do not want parental alienation coming to the forefront. And this is one of the main people of the movement, and it's happening on that video. So
I see what you're saying. So
yeah,
I see what you're saying. Oh, I thought you were talking more about just the institutionalized corporate Facebook / YouTube type censoring. But you're right. That's a good point. I mean, people who don't want to hear the message can leverage those infrastructures, even on YouTube, and flag videos and flag stuff. I had one of my, it's funny, kind of. I had one of my older videos, 3 years old, one of my second highest viewed videos with like 200,000 views on it. It's not a lot of views, but I mean that, for me, that's a pretty good thing. It all of a sudden it just got demonetized, and I appealed it through YouTube, and they said no, manually reviewed, and we're sustaining it. So I pushed back again. I'm like, hey, okay, cool. All right, just tell me why. What exactly did I do? Because they don't. I mean, they try to. YouTube likes to say that they'll tell you when it's no. They just say you violated our advertiser guidelines, and we're not. We're making it limited ads. And the answer that came back was the category for harmful speech, or like pranks, encouraging people to hurt themselves, or for other people to hurt themselves. I'm like, what? And and probably what happened is somebody saw the video and was like, hey, this is crap, and tagged it as as a problem. And YouTube, erred on the side of caution and just said, no, we're not gonna, I mean, they didn't delete the video, but I mean, it's crushed the views, and it's now, so the momentum that video was getting is gone. But yeah, it's a tough niche to be in. I mean, well, we're kind of in separate niches a little bit, but yeah, it's a very polarizing issue.
Absolutely. man. And that's the reason I talk to people that's inside of this all the time and say, guys, we got to come together. Some of these other movements out there, they're millions strong. And when they come after these topics to shut them down, they're heard and it works. And it makes it hard to get some of these other topics out that we're trying to talk about. But that was very alarming, and I'm definitely not a conspiracy theorist by no means. That's one of the reasons we're trying to move it over to YouTube as quick as we can. But we've definitely had some amazing episodes. The one that we just had with Dr. Childress this past weekend, I want to say we had like 4,000 active viewers on that.
That was an awesome discussion.
Oh yeah.
And it was weird. We were talking about this offline the other day. Like I said, I didn't know Eric. I hadn't heard of him. Didn't know he had a show. And scrolling through Facebook, and this thing popped up. Dad Talk Today with Dr. Childress and what was Dorsey? Dorsey.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy crap! I know who that guy is. And I clicked on it, and I'm like, dang! And actually, it was a fascinating discussion. They covered some really good topics. And one of the things that was really weird, we were talking about this offline, is so I popped this up. I think it was on my phone. And I'm like, man, okay, I want to sit and watch this on the computer. I couldn't find the show. It's like it recommended it to me, and I had to like look for your name and then try to find the show. And then finally, I found your Facebook page to find the live show or the live stream that was going on. But it was crazy. And I was just like, it could just be that I'm like search impaired. So, maybe I'm, making it a little bit more exciting than it really was, but it was driving me crazy. I'm like, and I was afraid to close the damn thing on my phone because I'm like, if this goes away, I will never find this again.
Yeah. It's on YouTube now. We uploaded that last night.
I saw that. I'll link. Yeah. I was going to share that. I'll share that out as a community tab issue, and definitely I'll put a link into it in the show note, because that was an excellent episode. Speaking of that, how many episodes have you done? Because you have a lot. How many are you up to?
Man, I haven't counted. We're probably up to like 30 official interviews on our podcast, but I go live from my personal page every day just to interact with people in the community so that they always know what's going on. There's some amazing stuff going on inside of our community but nobody's covering it. And that's why the idea for Dad Talk Today and them, becoming our own media.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of that, and you briefly mentioned it, but you didn't talk about what it was. You said you were doing a marathon earlier today. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on with that, why you were doing that, and what the cause that you're supporting?
Absolutely. So I got two different things that was going on with that. My friend, Dr. Mark Roseman, he runs the Toby Center down in Florida, guys. That is the biggest family transition center in the United States. There's 14 different locations in the state of Florida where if you need supervised visitation, mediation, and many other services, effective co-parenting, they offer it. His services are like $150 an hour versus if you have to go through that with a lawyer in the state of Florida, they run upwards of $400 to $500 an hour. Wow. And he has made these services so they can be affordable to parents that are really needing it, because it's just, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need those services, but unfortunately we do.
Right.
And he has a place that can facilitate that at a reasonable amount. Well, with him being a doctor that's actually not about the money and trying to help you out, they ran into some financial problems and it was about to close. And he is a very well-respected person in the community. And he needed $7,500 before December 10th or it was going to close. And wasn't his idea. I said, Dr. Mark, just come on there and talk with me for a second and then give me a microphone. I'm about to go for 8 straight hours. And I'm going to tell you, that was not easy. There's human elements that all of us have that we have to do every so often. And I had to get up, and fortunately I had a few guests in between that helped me do it. But as of tonight, we raised every single bit of that money for Dr. Mark Roseman, and his legacy for his mother is going to live on. Not only that, guys, I just want to share this really quick, Duane. This is the one that awesome. I'm really, really proud about. We had this father that hit me up, and he told me about his son. 2 years ago, they was inside of this hotel up in Michigan. He was in a hotel with his mom. His dad had been alienated, and he hadn't seen his dad, but he was in this hotel with his mom, and his mom was making hash oil. And she was using butane to extract the THC. Well, she went to light a cigarette while her son was sitting over there on the couch. The whole hotel blew up, and it burned him from head to toe. He died 4 times that night, and they brought him back. They sent him to 2 different hospitals. Both of those hospitals said there's nothing we can do for him, just make him comfortable. Finally, the Shriners took that on, and they saved this young man's life. Now he's got a trachea that if he doesn't get something done about it sometime soon, he's going to lose his voice. He's not going to be able to speak anymore. And he's got to have that surgery. The doctors, everybody have donated 100% of their time. But even after that, it's going to cost that family $150,000. We have been doing stuff on his case for about 2 months now. I wrote an article on the website, and we've been hitting it hard. And there's not much money inside this community because most everybody's been through family law.
Yeah,
so that was kind of, yeah, we're raising $150,000 inside of this community is almost impossible. But that article and those podcasts that we did caught on. And just yesterday, mainstream media caught on to it. He's been on 6 different pieces of mainstream media between yesterday and today. And before I came on this broadcast, $103,000 has been raised up to this point.
That's phenomenal, man.
Amazing.
That is awesome.
It's going to save this young man's life.
Good for you. I mean, you know, it just goes to show that just trying to do something, you know, positive, right? Trying to do something a little different as opposed to just sitting there complaining. You know, you're doing some tangible, actionable things. And I mean, that's two excellent stories that are profound. Congratulations for, you know, I mean, I know that the mainstream media hit on it, but it's like all that pre-publicity or you know, not free. Well, I guess it is free, but you know, publicity to get the story out there, to give people the opportunity to share it, for it to finally get into mainstream media is key.
Well, nobody would touch them. He had tried to go to mainstream media. It wasn't until we said we were going to cover it and started getting it circulated out there on social media that somebody said, hey, there's some steam behind this.
Yeah.
But the fact that he had to go that long and it took us to cover that to get it there is what blows my mind. The good thing is now it's being taken care of. And I tell you what, man, that young man will steal your heart if you see him. His name is Brian Adams.
And you said you have a podcast with him or with his dad?
Well, I did a few. I've had them on there a few times. We had presidential candidate Adam Kokesh on one time, and I made sure to bring Brian on while he was on there because he was talking about family law and parental alienation. And I said, here's one of the people that you're fighting for.
Nice.
Because you want to know what's serious when you're sitting across a camera from something like that and somebody's saying, I need your help. That's when this becomes very serious. It's no longer just a podcast, you know.
Well, and I think the key point that you're getting, you kind of touched on, is there's a perception of what family law is and what this is, right? And for the most part, I think you're right. Mainstream media doesn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole because it's you know, it's a danger zone, right? And I think as more story, like with what you're doing, and more stories get out there and more information is out there, and it puts a human story or human element to it that's not an us and them, not a controversial type thing. It makes it easier for people to listen to it, right? I mean, as opposed to, you know, you turn something on and it's like, oh, okay, well, this is a men's rights thing, and you know, it's vitriolic and you know, whatever, and people just tune it out. It has to be a message that people can listen to, right? I mean, if you don't give them the opportunity to go, hey, that's an intriguing story, I want to hear more. And it's not just because you could take that story and turn it into, you know, the system is all bad, and, you know, the X is crazy. And, you know, I mean, and yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true. But then a lot of people are going to start tuning out thinking that, you know, it's BS or, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I tell you what, it gets you more than anything, man. When he came on the podcast and we talked to him, I asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, and he said he wants to be a burn surgeon. And it's just little stuff like that, man.
How old is the guy?
He's 16.
Man, that's a rough life, but man, talk about some serious perseverance. And I mean, and from what you were saying, they didn't think he was going to make it. I mean, they were already basically had written him off, right? I mean, so it's a miracle that he's still here. Yeah. Man, that's just, the stuff that you're doing is phenomenal. I really encourage people to check Eric's show out, subscribe to his channel, follow him on Facebook. There's a lot of just the episodes I've seen, there's a lot of actionable information and interviews with people where they're providing their expertise on techniques from law, dealing with family law, dealing with your relationship with your kids, dealing with yourself. I mean, and you were talking earlier when we were talking, I mean, you have a huge list of guests coming up, right? I mean, it's not, what's your schedule like going forward?
Tomorrow night we've got Christopher Carlton coming back on the podcast. He's been on The View, Ricky Lake, all the big stations. He was told that his child was a boy when it was actually a girl, and he was also told that his child had died. And a few months later, he found out the mom had actually gave it up for adoption, and he still is 10 years later. He still doesn't have access to that child, but that's just one of the extreme cases. He was our number one rated episode. We're going to come on and do a little happy Thanksgiving because he's a very humorous guy. As much serious stuff as he's been through, he will trip you out.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, man. Carnell Smith is coming, like I told you about, this Saturday. He's been on Dr. Phil. He's the one that paid 11 years in child support for a child that wasn't his. We got Yahya McClain coming in 2 weeks. Yahya was married to Layla Ali. He's a 2-time world champion boxer. And he also made a film called Casualties of War, Warriors Against the Regime. It's a film about parental alienation. And,
nice. I didn't know about that one.
Yeah. We've got a few more, but that's the ones I remember off the top of my head. So really looking forward to it. And I get married next weekend. So.
Hey, see, the great part about that is you're still living your life. I mean, you're still in the middle of this, but you're not, you haven't given up. That's good for you. Where can people find more information out about you, Eric?
So we're on Facebook.com/DadTalkToday. We got DadTalkToday.com, Patreon.com/DadTalkToday, and we're here on YouTube as well. That's we're trying to get a presence known here, and I just want to say especially to you, Duane. We talked a little bit off air, and this is one really, really cool guy. I appreciate everything that you shared with me and showed me. So it's shows like this, guys, that is going to change the world. So.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for taking some time. I know you're super busy. Thanks for coming on. Guys, check out his stuff. I will put the links in the show notes and the description. Follow him, check his stuff out, subscribe on YouTube, help that part grow. And man, Eric, I'm excited to see what's coming up next, and hopefully I can bring you on again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, Eric. Take care.
All right, you too, man.